My daughter-in-law told me to leave my grandson's christening before the cake was cut. She said I was embarrassing the family. I smiled, put the envelope back in my jacket pocket, and walked out. By the time I reached my truck, I could hear her laughing. 3 weeks later, she stopped laughing. Before I go any further, if you're new here, please subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. It helps more than you know. I parked my old Ford Phone 150 inches the overflow lot behind street. Andrews Parish Hall, the same church where my son was baptized 31 years ago, where my wife and I renewed our vows on our 25th anniversary, and where we said goodbye to her 6 years ago last November. The lot was full of cars I didn't recognize, shiny SUVs and sedans that probably cost more per month than my first mortgage. I sat behind the wheel for a moment, straightening my tie in the rearview mirror. The brown one. My wife picked it out for me at a Macy's in downtown Columbus the Christmas before she got sick. I wear it to occasions that matter. The envelope was on the passenger seat. I had visited my bank 2 days earlier and converted the balance of a savings account my wife and I had kept separate for 30 years, our someday fund. We called it $250,000, turned into a cashier's check, made out to my son, a gift for the baby, a fresh start for the family. I had been planning it for months. I tucked it into my breast pocket, felt its weight against my chest, and walked toward the hall. The room was decorated in pale blue and gold. Helium balloons clustered in every corner. A banner above the entrance read, "Welcome to the world, Theo," in calligraphy that looked like it cost more than the average person's rent. Round tables were draped in linen, each one centered with a floral arrangement taller than my grandson himself. I had seen weddings with less production value. My son was standing near the gift table when I came through the door. He saw me and something flickered across his face. Not quite discomfort, but not relief either. Something in between. He crossed the room with his hand extended and shook mine the way you shake hands with a business acquaintance, brief and businesslike. "Dad, you made it." "Of course I made it," I said. "I wouldn't miss Theo's christening." He nodded, glanced over his shoulder at something I couldn't see yet, and nodded again. "Right. Yeah. Of course." My daughter-in-law appeared at his elbow the way she often did, materializing out of the crowd with the practiced ease of someone who monitored a room constantly. She was wearing a cream-colored dress and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She kissed the air beside my cheek. "You found it okay?" "I've been coming to this church for 40 years, I said pleasantly. "Right." She laughed once, quickly. "Well, the photographer's just about to do the family portraits. We'll find you a seat somewhere comfortable." She paused, looking me up and down in a way she probably thought was subtle. "That's a nice tie." I thanked her. She moved away before I could say anything else. My son watched her go, then looked at me, and I saw the familiar expression on his face, the one he'd been wearing for the past 3 years, ever since they'd moved into the house I owned in Westerville. The expression that said, "I'm sorry, but I'm not going to say anything." I found my seat on my own. Table 11. Against the back wall, behind a column wrapped in white ribbon. I could see the head table from where I sat, but just barely. There were 9 other tables between us. I counted them while the room filled around me. For the first hour, I did what I always do in rooms where I feel invisible. I watched. I watched my daughter-in-law work the crowd, touching arms, throwing her head back to laugh, steering the photographer toward angles that flattered her. I watched my son follow her like a man walking a path someone else had drawn. I watched 2 of her sisters receive the kind of warm, genuine embraces that I had stopped receiving around the time the Westerville house became their home instead of Dad's rental property. I watched my grandson sleep in his carrier, oblivious to all of it, pink and new and perfect, and felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't known was tight. My son stood up to give a toast. He thanked the guests, thanked the priest, thanked his wife's parents who were seated at the head table for flying in from Scottsdale. He thanked the caterer by name. He did not mention me. It wasn't the first time. At Thanksgiving 3 years ago, he had given a long, detailed speech about gratitude and neglected to thank the person who had paid for the house they were living in, the person who had co-signed his car loan, The person who had quietly covered 2 months of expenses when his wife's boutique consulting business had a bad quarter. I had told myself then that omissions weren't the same as statements. I had been very good at telling myself things like that. My daughter-in-law came to my table during the cocktail hour, when the room was loudest and I was easiest to ignore. She stood over me with a glass of champagne and a new quality in her expression. Something decided. "I need to talk to you about something," she said. She glanced at the woman seated beside me, someone's aunt, who I had been having a genuinely pleasant conversation with, and waited until the woman excused herself. "The photographer is going to start the family portraits in about 20 minutes. I wanted to give you a heads up." "All right," I said. "We're doing immediate family only. Me, my husband, Theo, and our parents." She paused. "My parents. From Scottsdale." I looked at her steadily. "I'm Theo's grandfather." "Yes, and we love you." She said it the way people say things they're required to say. "But we have a very specific vision for the photos. A cohesive look. And I just think it would be easier for everyone if you sat this part out. There are so many other nice moments in the day. The cutting of the cake. You're asking me to not be in my grandson's christening photos." She tilted her head slightly, the way she did when she felt she was being misunderstood. "I'm asking you to be flexible. It's one set of photos. It's not a big deal." I sat with that for a moment. I thought about the envelope in my breast pocket. I thought about my wife's handwriting on a birthday card she wrote to our son when he turned 25. "The thing I'm most proud of is that you know how to love people. Don't ever lose that." "Okay," I said. She seemed surprised that I didn't argue. She started to say something else. Something about finding me a good spot near the dessert table. And I stood up. Not abruptly, just calmly, the way you stand up when a meeting is over. "I think I'll head out," I said. Her expression shifted. "You don't have to leave entirely. I just meant the photos. I know what you meant." I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair. "Give Theo my love. He's a beautiful boy." I walked toward the exit. I passed the table where my son was talking to someone from his office. He saw me with my jacket in my hand. Something moved across his face. "Dad, where are you going?" "Home," I said. "It was a lovely party, but we haven't even done the cake." "I know." I put my hand on his arm, just for a second. "You have a beautiful son. Take good care of him." I walked out through the lobby, past the table of framed photos of my grandson at various stages of his 4 months of life, past the table of Jordan almonds in little mesh bags with blue ribbon, past the sign-in book that I had not been asked to sign. The October air hit me when I pushed through the doors, clean and cold and honest. I reached my truck, put the key in the ignition. Saturday, the envelope was still in my breast pocket. I took it out and held it in both hands for a moment, looking at my son's name in the bank's formal typeface. Then I opened the glove compartment, set it inside, and closed it. I drove home. My wife's chair was where it always is, in the corner of the living room by the window that looks out over the backyard. I keep a lamp on next to it in the evenings. I don't know exactly why. Habit, maybe. The idea that the room should look like someone might sit there. I made coffee and sat across from the empty chair and let myself feel what I was feeling, which took longer to name than I expected. It wasn't anger. Not exactly. It was something older and quieter. The kind of feeling that comes not from a single wound, but from a long series of small ones, and then from finally stopping to count them. I thought about the house in Westerville. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, on a cul-de-sac my wife had always liked. We'd bought it as a rental property in 2009. After she died, I offered it to my son at no cost, a place to live while they got on their feet. That was 3 years ago. They had never paid rent. They had never paid utilities. They had, in that time, repainted 4 rooms, colors I wouldn't have chosen, replaced the kitchen hardware without asking, and installed a security system that sent all its alerts to my daughter-in-law's phone, not mine. The deed still had one name on it. Mine. I thought about the car loan I had co-signed, the business expenses I had quietly covered, the 2 years' worth of loans that had never been repaid and had gradually stopped being mentioned. I thought about the Thanksgiving toast. I thought about my place at table 11, behind the column, behind the ribbon, Then I thought about $250,000 sitting in my glove compartment. My coffee got cold. I didn't drink it. I picked up my phone and searched for a name I had seen advertised at a Chamber of Commerce event 2 months earlier. Patricia Haynes, estate planning and family law. I left a voicemail. It was a Sunday evening. I told her what I needed. I kept it brief. She called me back the next morning at 8:15. The office was downtown, on the 7th floor of a building that had once been an insurance company. Patricia Haynes was somewhere in her late 50s, with reading glasses on a beaded chain and the calm, unhurried manner of someone who had heard every version of this conversation before. She did not seem surprised by anything I told her. "Walk me through the property situation," she said. After I had laid out the documents, I'd brought the deed, 3 years of utility statements, all of them in my name. They've been living there since my wife passed. No lease, no rent, no formal agreement of any kind. She looked at the deed. Ohio law classifies them as tenants at will. You can terminate their right to occupy with 30 days written notice, provided it's properly served. She looked up. "Is there any reason to believe they'd contest it?" "They'll try," I said. "But they have no standing. There's nothing in writing. There's nothing with their names on it." She nodded slowly. "And the car loan?" "Co-signed. But I've been making the payments for the past 8 months. I have the bank records." She made a note. "We can dissolve the co-signing arrangement with proper documentation." She set her pen down and looked at me directly. "Mr." She paused, using my name. "What's your goal here? Do you want to reclaim the property, or are you looking for leverage to reopen a conversation with your son?" I thought about that for a moment. I thought about Table 11. "I want to reclaim everything," I said. "The conversation can happen after." She nodded. "Then let's start with the notice." I left her office an hour and 40 minutes later with a folder of documents and a clear understanding of exactly how much authority I had always had but had never chosen to use. The drive home felt different than the drive there. Something had been realigned. My son called on a Tuesday. I watched his name light up on my screen 3 times before I answered. "Dad, can we talk? About yesterday?" "Sure," I said. The silence on his end lasted several seconds. He had expected more resistance, or more hurt, or something he could push against. I gave him none of it. She didn't mean for it to come out like that. The photos thing. She just gets stressed about events. I understand. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "How's Theo?" He told me Theo was fine. He told me about a funny thing Theo had done with a pacifier. He told me his wife felt bad. I listened to all of it and said appropriate things. And when the call was over, I sat quietly for a few minutes before going back to the paperwork on my kitchen table. The notice was served on a Friday morning. Certified mail. Return receipt requested. I know the exact moment it arrived because my phone buzzed with a delivery confirmation at 11:47 a.m. By 11:52, my son was calling. I let it ring. By noon, my daughter-in-law was calling from a number I'd had for 3 years. I let that ring too. By 3 o'clock, they were in my driveway. I watched them from the kitchen window. My daughter-in-law got out of the car first, still in her work clothes. Something clutched in her hand that I recognized as the notice. My son got out more slowly, the way a person moves when they're not sure they want to arrive at the destination. I opened the door before they knocked. My daughter-in-law was already talking. "What is this? What does this mean? You can't just come in," I said. She came in the way a person enters a room they've decided to dominate. My son came in behind her and stood slightly to her left, which was where he usually stood. 30 days, she said, holding up the notice. "You're giving us 30 days. After everything, after we've been there for 3 years, built our life there. You're giving us 30 days like we're strangers." "You are tenants at will," I said. "That's the legal classification. There's never been a lease. Because you said we didn't need one. You said it was family. It is family," I said. "That's why I gave you 30 days instead of the minimum required by law." I kept my voice even. I wasn't performing calm. I actually was calm, which surprised me. "I'm happy to give you the names of some real estate agents who can help you find something quickly. The market has some good options in your price range. My daughter-in-law stared at me. I could see the moment she decided to try a different approach. Her voice dropped. Something softened around her eyes. I know Sunday was. I know I handled that badly. I should have been more thoughtful about the photos. I'm sorry. I truly am. But this, she gestured with a notice. This isn't about photos. This is about a roof over my child's head. Over your grandson's head. I looked at her for a moment. Then I looked at my son, who was staring at the floor. Theo will always have a roof over his head, I said. So will you. I just won't be providing it anymore. My daughter-in-law left first, walking quickly through my front door and not looking back. My son stayed a moment longer. He looked like a man standing in a house that was burning down very slowly and wondering whether to run or wait and see if it put itself out. Dad, he said. Just that. Just my name, well. The word he uses for my name. I love you, I said. That doesn't change. But some things needed to change. I think you know that. He left without answering. The next 3 weeks were educational. I discovered that my daughter-in-law had created a private social media group and posted a detailed account of what she called my betrayal. Several people I knew sent me screenshots. She described me as vindictive, unstable, someone who had turned on his own family over nothing. I read each version of the story with a kind of detached curiosity. None of them included the part about Table 11. None of them included the $250,000 in my glove compartment. My son's college roommate called me. A neighbor from our old street called me. My wife's younger sister, Carolyn, called me from Portland, and when I told her what had happened at the christening, she was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. She asked you not to be in the photos, Carolyn said finally. That's right. Another long silence. Ellen would have had something to say about that. My wife's name was Ellen. It had been 6 years since anyone had said it to me in that tone. The tone of someone who knew exactly who she was. She would have, I agreed. Carolyn said she was sorry. She said she'd had a feeling about my daughter-in-law since the wedding, 4 years ago, but hadn't wanted to say anything. She said my son was a good man who had gotten turned around somewhere and needed to find his way back. She said she was on my side, clearly and without qualification, and that it mattered to her that I knew that. I thanked her and sat with the phone in my lap after we hung up, feeling something I hadn't expected to feel, less alone. My son found me in the parking garage of my office building on a Wednesday morning 2 weeks after the notice was served. He was leaning against the hood of his car with a coffee cup in both hands. And for a moment, in that flat concrete light, he looked so much like himself at 22 that something in my chest tightened. I'm not here to argue, he said. I just wanted to talk. Without her around, I stopped walking. All right, she's really upset. The house thing. He looked at the coffee cup. We found a place, an apartment, over in Grandview. We're signing the lease next week. Good, I said. Grandview's a nice area. It's smaller than the house. Obviously. He looked up. I'm not saying that to make you feel bad. We're adjusting. I know. He was quiet for a moment. She's not all bad, Dad. I need you to know that. She's under a lot of pressure and she handles it badly sometimes, and the christening thing was, he stopped. I should have said something. When she came to your table, I saw her do it and I didn't say anything, and I've been thinking about that. I looked at my son and saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Not the man who gave Thanksgiving toasts that didn't include me. The man behind that man. The boy who, at 9 years old, had cried for 45 minutes when we found a dead bird in the backyard and insisted on giving it a proper burial. I know she's not all bad, I said. I also know you're capable of more than you've been showing me. He nodded. The motion was small and quick, like it cost him something. I'm going to do better, he said. I don't know if it fixes anything, but I want you to know that. It fixes the part that matters most, I said. The rest is just paperwork. He almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. The apartment walkthrough happened on a day I drove past Westerville without stopping. And when I got home that evening, I called Patricia Haynes and updated the documents we had been preparing. There was other paperwork to manage, beyond the property. Ellen and I had been meticulous record keepers. 40 years of building something together leaves a significant paper trail. The estate, as Patricia and I laid it out together over 3 separate meetings, amounted to considerably more than my son or daughter-in-law had probably ever done the math on. I revised my will. My son's portion remained his, conditionally. If he was carrying personal debt at the time of my death, a financial trustee would manage the disbursement in increments, ensuring it went toward his stability rather than his wife's next business venture. The bulk of the estate, roughly 70%, I redirected. Part of it went to a foundation I established in Ellen's name, focused on housing support for elderly adults in Franklin County. Part of it went to a scholarship fund at the community college where Ellen had taken night classes in her 40s, the same college where she had earned her degree at 47, the proudest I had ever seen her. I named it after her. My daughter-in-law discovered the will's existence 3 weeks after they moved into the Grandview apartment, through a source I still haven't fully identified, someone at the attorney's office, or perhaps my son had said something. She called me from a blocked number. I recognized her voice anyway. "I'm told you've changed your will." "I update my estate planning regularly," I said. "It's responsible financial management. Don't do that." Her voice had a new quality. Stripped of the party hostess warmth she usually maintained, it was harder, colder, more honest, in a way. "Don't treat me like I'm being unreasonable. We are your family." "My son is my family," I said. "You're his wife, and I wish you well. But I'm not obligated to fund a lifestyle that doesn't include me. He wouldn't even know about your money if you hadn't. You made him dependent on you, and now you're punishing him for it." I sat with that for a moment, because there was something in it that deserved acknowledgement. "You may be right about some of that," I said. "I was too easy for too long. That's something I contributed, but I've corrected it now, for both of us." She hung up. I put my phone on the kitchen table and looked at it, then looked at Ellen's chair, then went and made tea. My son called the following evening. He didn't mention the will. He asked if I had plans for Thanksgiving. I told him I was thinking about driving up to see Carolyn in Portland. He said that sounded nice. He asked if he could call me the following week. I said yes. We talked for 45 minutes about things that had nothing to do with houses or money or christening photographs. He told me about Theo learning to roll over. He told me about a work project that was going well, and I asked the right questions, and he answered them. And for the first time in longer than I could precisely calculate, I heard something in my son's voice that sounded like himself. I flew to Portland for Thanksgiving. Carolyn's house was full of her children and grandchildren, and a general state of organized chaos that Ellen would have loved. There was a dog named Biscuit who knocked over a gravy boat and briefly became the most important story of the evening. I laughed so hard at dinner that Carolyn's daughter looked alarmed, then relieved, then joined in. I called my son from the airport on the way home. He picked up on the second ring. "How was it?" "Good," I said. "Really good." "How was yours?" He paused. "Quiet. We went to her parents' place. It was fine." "Tell." He laughed for the first time. A real laugh, not just gas. He sounded different when he talked about his son. Lighter. Like someone had opened a window. "I got it on video. I'll send it to you." He did, that evening. I watched it 4 times. My grandson, 4 months old, laughing at something his father was doing with a stuffed elephant. The sound was absurd and perfect. I sent back, "That's the best thing I've seen all year." He replied with a single heart. Winter passed the way winters do when you're used to spending them alone, not badly, but slowly. I worked on the foundation paperwork. I took a woodworking class at the community center, something I'd been meaning to do for 20 years. I made a birdhouse that was structurally sound if not particularly attractive, and I set it up in my backyard in the spot where Ellen used to put her coffee cup when she sat outside in the mornings. My son brought Theo over on a Saturday in February, just the 2 of them. He called first to make sure it was okay, which was new. He arrived with the baby in a carrier against his chest, looking slightly overwhelmed and deeply happy in the way that new parents always do. I held my grandson for the first time that afternoon. He was heavier than I expected, solid and warm, and he looked up at me with the unfocused intensity of a baby trying to decide whether something is interesting. I talked to him quietly. the way you talk to someone whose language you're learning. And he grabbed my finger and held it. My son sat across from us in the living room, watching. After a while, he said, I showed her the foundation, the Ellen Clark thing, the housing initiative. I looked up. She looked it up online. She didn't say much, but I know she was. I think she understood something. He picked at a loose thread on his sleeve. She's not. She's working on it. We both are. That's all I can ask for, I said. Theo made a sound that wasn't quite a word, but contained the structural ambitions of one. We both looked at him. He looked back at us, satisfied with the attention. He's going to be something, my son said. He already is, I said. The foundation broke ground in April, 6 months after the paperwork was finalized. A small ceremony, just a few people. Patricia Haynes, the nonprofit director, Frank Gallagher, from the Contractors Association, who was overseeing the build, Carolyn, who flew in from Portland and wore a yellow raincoat because April in Columbus doesn't make promises. A chaplain said a few words. I said a few words. I talked about Ellen, about the 38 years we'd spent building things together, the house on Tremont Avenue where we raised our son, the rental properties we bought one by one, the savings account we called the Someday Fund. I talked about the things she wanted that we kept postponing, the trip to see the redwoods, the pottery class, the volunteer work she'd been meaning to start. I talked about how you think there will always be more time, and then there isn't. This is what she would have done with the someday money, I said. She would have found the people who needed it most, and she would have shown up. That's who she was. That's who I'm trying to be. Carolyn was crying. Frank Gallagher, who I don't think had come prepared to feel things, had his jaw set in a particular way that men use when they're managing themselves. I wasn't crying. I felt clear, present, the way you feel when something is exactly right. We drove a shovel into the earth and someone took photographs, and afterward we all went to a diner on 5th Street and had coffee and pie and talked for 2 hours. When I got home, there was a text from my son. Saw the news about the groundbreaking, the Ellen Clark initiative. Dad, I'm really proud of you. I think she would be too. I held the phone for a long time before I responded. She'd have been there with the shovel, I wrote back. I know she was anyway. He sent back. Yeah, me too. A month later, on a Sunday morning when the light was coming through the kitchen window in that particular way it does in May, I sat at my table with coffee and a letter that had arrived the previous week, 4 handwritten pages in my daughter-in-law's careful cursive. It was not what I expected. No demands, no grievances restated. She wrote about the counseling she and my son had been attending, about patterns she was beginning to understand in herself, about the christening, not an explanation but an acknowledgement, clear-eyed and specific, that what she had done was wrong. The last paragraph was the one I read 3 times. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not sure I've earned the right to ask for anything yet. I just want you to know that your son loves you more than he's been showing you, and that I understand now that part of that is my fault. I'm going to try to do better. Not because of the foundation or the will or any of it. Because Theo deserves a family that actually behaves like one. I folded the letter. I put it in the drawer where I keep the things I want to keep. Outside, the birdhouse I had built was doing its job. A pair of wrens had moved in sometime in April and were very loud about their opinions of the neighborhood. I watched them from the window while I finished my coffee. The yard was green. The morning was warm. My phone buzzed. A video from my son, Theo, attempting to pull himself upright by gripping the coffee table, getting about 3/4 of the way up, reconsidering, and sitting back down, with an expression of philosophical acceptance. I laughed. Genuinely, without effort. The way you laugh when something is simply funny and you are simply present for it. I typed back. He's going to be walking by summer. My son replied, God help us all. Then, you want to come over Sunday? For dinner? Just us. I sat with that for a moment, not out of reluctance, out of wanting to notice it properly. 3 words that would have meant nothing 18 months ago, just us now, meant exactly what they said. I'll bring dessert, I wrote. I put the phone down, poured the last of the coffee, and went to sit in the chair by the window. Ellen's chair. The morning light came in at an angle that caught the dust moving in the air, and the wrens were arguing about something in the backyard, and the city was going about its business beyond the fence line. I had spent 64 years building things: houses, businesses, a marriage, a family. I had spent the last 6 of them trying to figure out what I was building without Ellen beside me. For a while, I had been building a wall of accommodation, stacking up the small surrenders one on top of another until I couldn't see over them. That was done now. What I was building instead was something I couldn't fully name yet, but I could feel the shape of it. A foundation with my wife's name on it, rising from the ground in East Columbus. A grandson who held my finger like he already trusted me. A son who was finding his way back to himself. An empty chair I still keep lit. Not because I can't let go, but because some things deserve to be kept. The wrens settled. The morning held. I was, after everything, exactly where I was supposed to be. If this story moved you, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. And if you're ready for the next story, click the box on the left.